I hope you've watched the first part of this lesson. It's now time to study 5 common sentence patterns. How exactly will knowledge of sentence patterns help you? Is it worth learning? I think so. First, you can create a variety of sentences and not be limited to 1 or 2 patterns each time you speak or write. Second, you can more easily correct sentences because you'll know how sentences are built. You'll understand the parts of a clause and how they fit together. Lastly, you'll have an easier time when you read and come across long sentences. You'll be able to recognize clauses by identifying the subject and the verb. So let's get started.
Learn about sentence structure in English with Jennifer.
The first pattern is the most basic one, subject plus verb. For example, we relaxed. Remember that verbs express an action or a state. Here are some longer examples of this pattern. I haven't been practicing. Henry and his friends are going to be performing. The second pattern adds one more element, subject plus verb plus object, a direct object. For example, they played music. Some verbs take an object. We call these transitive verbs. Direct objects are objects of verbs. Someone or something is acting upon the object, performing on the object. For example, they played music. Played what? Played music. So recall the first pattern with our model sentence, we relaxed. There was no object. Some verbs don't have an object. They don't need one. We call these intransitive verbs. So we have transitive and intransitive verbs. Only transitive verbs have an object. Here's a tip. When you learn a new verb, pay attention to the grammar. Is it transitive or intransitive? A learner's dictionary will tell you. It will show you whether that verb requires an object. But some verbs can have both meanings. It can be both transitive and intransitive. A verb you already know like that is play. The children are playing. The children played a game. Here's a quick note on objects. Objects are nouns or anything that behaves like a noun. This includes pronouns, gerunds, could even be a whole clause, but that's for another lesson. Both sentences, subject-verb and subject-verb-object, can add on one more unit called an adverbial. An adverbial can be a single word, a phrase. It could even be a whole clause, an adverb clause, but that's for another lesson. Here's what you need to know. Adverbials add information. This information answers questions like where, when, why, how, which includes other how questions like how long, how often, how much. So our first pattern, subject plus verb, can become subject plus verb plus adverbial. The children played in the sand. Where? In the sand. Our second pattern, subject plus verb plus object, can become subject plus verb plus object plus adverbial. They sang songs last night. When? Last night. We can have more than one adverbial in a sentence, and adverbials aren't always in a final position. They sang songs on the beach last night. How many adverbials? 2. Where? When? Watch this rewrite. Last night they sang songs on the beach. When you start using more than one adverbial in a sentence, they usually follow an order: manner, place, time. Time usually goes last. But be careful not to make your sentences too long and too wordy. What I understand is that some adverbials are necessary and some are optional.
Let's look at some examples. Tom and his 2 roommates lived there. The party lasted till dawn. I put my name on the waiting list. Would these sentences make sense if we took out the adverbials? No, they're necessary. Now look at these next 2 examples. People danced all night long. I'd like private lessons with Jennifer. I'd argue that these adverbials could be omitted. We'll talk more about terminology in a couple minutes.
The third basic sentence pattern has 3 parts: subject plus verb plus complement. For example, today was fun. Fun is the complement. And we could add an optional adverbial to this pattern. Today was fun as usual. That's subject plus verb plus complement plus adverbial. We talked about transitive and intransitive verbs. There's another group of verbs we need to talk about: linking verbs. Have you heard of those? Linking verbs link or connect the subject to an idea called the complement. We need the complement to fully understand the subject. For example, she's an artist. She's what? An artist. You seem confused. You seem like what? You seem confused. We need the complements to complete the idea, to fully explain the subject. Complements are very often nouns or adjectives. Here's a list of common linking verbs: appear, be, become, feel, look, seem, sound, taste. There are a few others. After these linking verbs, you'll usually see a noun phrase or an adjective phrase. But adverbs and prepositional phrases can also fit this sentence pattern. She's upstairs. She's in her studio. Not everyone agrees on labels. We agree that adverbs and prepositional phrases are adverbials. But can adverbials be complements after a linking verb? I think so. But if the terminology is confusing, then just remember this: we need subject plus linking verb plus more information about the subject. That information is necessary. So we always need more information about the subject after a linking verb. Subject complements are only one type of complement. Let me quickly show you another. Look at this example. She was excited about the party. What pattern does this sentence follow? Well, she was excited. That's subject plus verb plus complement. Excited is an adjective, it's a subject complement. About the party is information that explains her excitement. It explains the adjective. It's an adjective complement. So our sentence is now subject plus verb plus complement plus complement. The first is a subject complement. It links to the subject with a linking verb. And then we have an adjective complement directly after the adjective. So complements define or fully explain another part of the sentence. Adjective complements are very often prepositional phrases. If you'd like to learn more collocations like excited about and afraid of, you can watch my series of videos on prepositions. Our fourth sentence pattern has 4 parts: subject plus verb plus object plus object. How do we have 2 objects? Well, the first is an indirect object, the second is a direct object. It will be clearer when you see an example. We showed our cousins a good time. What did you show? A good time. That's the direct object. Who did we show it to? Our cousins. That's the indirect object. The indirect object is often the one who receives the action. We showed our cousins a good time. Indirect object, direct object. If I tell you a secret, what did I tell? A secret. To who? To you. Tell you a secret. I sang her a song. Sang her a song. Indirect object, direct object. The basic pattern is subject plus verb plus object plus object. We can add an adverbial. Look at these 2 examples. We showed our cousins a really good time last weekend. Subject plus verb plus object plus adverbial. Last weekend, we showed our cousins a good time. Here we have the adverbial at the beginning. We've talked about subject complements, and I've shown you adjective complements directly after an adjective. Get ready for the 5th sentence pattern. It's subject plus verb plus object complement. Here's an example. I consider that the best trip ever. The best trip ever is the object complement. It explains or defines the object. It directly follows it, and I need that to fully understand. I consider that to be what? The best trip ever. Some sentences require an object complement, like this one. Here's a similar example. We consider him family. Consider him to be what? We consider him family. Here's a nice example. You make each day special. You make each day what? Special. We need the adjective, we need that word as the object complement to explain the object. Was it worth learning these patterns? Well, I want to show you the power of this new knowledge. Let's try an exercise. I'll show you 5 sentences. I want you to find and correct the mistake in each sentence. I know you can do it. Here's the first sentence. What's wrong with it? Put is a transitive verb. It needs an object. The sentence pattern should be sentence, verb, object. You put what on the table? You put it on the table. You put the vase on the table. Here's the second sentence. This sentence has no subject. The basic pattern should be subject, verb, object. Who missed the bus? Put in a subject. This morning I missed the bus. Here's the third sentence. This sentence is missing a verb, a linking verb. The pattern is subject, verb, complement. Let's put in a verb. Music is a beautiful art form. Look at the fourth sentence. This sentence has two objects, and they're in the correct order, but if you put the indirect object first, you need to drop that preposition. The pattern is subject, verb, plus indirect object, plus object. What's the full sentence? I sent her a thank you note. Here's the fifth sentence. This one's more challenging. Can you figure out the relationship of all these parts? Identify the subject and the verb. This whole experience has made. Does the verb have an object? Me. Has made me what? We need a complement, an object complement. Subject, verb, object, and object complement. Has made me what? A better person. Remember, the 5 basic sentence patterns are subject, verb, subject, verb, object, subject, verb, complement, subject, verb, indirect object plus direct object, and sentence, verb, object, and object complement. And we can add adverbials to these patterns. I hope you found this lesson useful. That's all for now. Thanks for watching and happy studies.
Remember to follow me on social media. All the links are on my YouTube channel.